Welcome to episode 47 of Fresh Air at 5, the podcast. This week, you are going to hear a story that you're not going to believe if you haven't been paying attention to the news in my local area. I've got a story to tell you about a flood that started on Monday and is continuing and persisting through the end of the week. It's been a week of new trauma and stress in our environment around here in British Columbia, southwestern British Columbia, and just affecting people's lives. So, you know, it's a heavy thing. You'll hear me talk and be distracted by the things that I'm hearing and seeing, and affected by, hearing stories from my colleagues. A couple colleagues have been trapped on the other side of the floodwater and couldn't get to work. So that's what you're going to hear. But you're also going to hear a number of great reviews that I do on podcasts, and it starts off on Monday. The first review is Mindful Monday with George Koros, and I really like George's Mindset Mondays, and he talks about how to do things and just ways and strategies for thinking and doing all kinds of stuff. Fantastic all through the week, lots of different podcasts, and ends up on the end of the week with Jake Miller and talking about even design thinking in how we can have apps and tools that can grow design thinking in our students. All right, so without further ado, take a listen. Episode 47, Fresh Air at 5, the podcast. Bye.
Hey, I'm Gretchen Bridgers of the Always a Lessons Empowering Educators podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to Fresh Air at 5, the podcast. I'm your host, Brian Carpenter. Fresh Air at 5 is my regular attempt to exercise by walking about my neighborhood to take in podcast content, then reflect in an unedited video, which I finally post to my Twitter channel. This podcast will be a regular collection of the audio from these self-view videos. You can follow me on Twitter at FreshAirAtFive, or check out my website, briancarpenter.com, for other content I have created and collected. Hey, PLN, Monday, November 15, 2021, and this morning it is later than normal. I am not out walking this morning. I skipped walking this morning because it is apparently what they're calling the atmospheric river here in southwestern British Columbia, where I live near Vancouver, and we have had this weekend a ridiculous amount of rain, and it is not stopping until later this afternoon, they say. I think we've gotten over 200 millimeters of rain, which is almost 20 centimeters, which is better part of 8 inches of rain since Saturday afternoon. So it's been pretty wet. I didn't go for my walk this morning. I sat at home and I listened to George Koros from Mindset Monday. Love the tunes, George. And I like your episode this morning as you talked about who we surround ourselves with and how we engage with those around us, and who do we allow into our space to be those critical voices and those that give us advice. So take a listen to George's episode. And George, your opening statement you said there, I appreciate your vulnerability in saying that, and that's what I want to say. Yes, it is challenging for all of us at different times, and I appreciate you acknowledging that, because I didn't know that about you at all. Yes, about your strategies for engaging with people, push the mute button when you need to, be thoughtful about who you're taking criticism from. Would you take advice from that same person? Because do they have a right to speak into your life? And we can control a whole lot about the voices that go into our head. And this is part of why I listen to podcasts from certain people and not from other people. All right, have a fabulous day, everybody. Stay dry out there. I'm going in the building to stay dry here. All right, peace out. Bye. Hey PLN, it is November 16, 2021, and off the top, schools closed here in my town of Abbotsford due to flooding in the area and emergency crews dealing with, well, evacuating people from their homes in the floodplain because the water has risen so high yesterday after we had such a volume of rain. So that's going on today. And you know, I'm honestly saying it's difficult to listen to the podcast this morning as I'm out for Fresh Air at 5 because I'm distracted thinking about all the water that's down the hill, just down there. And you know, I live up on high on a side of a mountain, and I'm thankful that my house doesn't have flooding issues, but there are many in our town that are being affected. There's evacuated areas where, you know, due to flooding, have been evacuated. I heard that the hovercrafts were out last night going into people's residences to rescue them. The amount of farm animals that are out there on the flats that probably, oh my goodness, I hope they make it. You know, that's incredible because that's going to affect our agriculture around here. Things like that. So, yeah, I'm a bit distracted, but I did get to listen to the Tom Schirmer podcast, episode 50. And Tom, congratulations on the milestone. Fantastic. I appreciate your podcast because it gets my brain thinking about things in a way that I'm not necessarily, used to thinking about, like assessment and how we do instruction and the guests that you've brought on. And I've appreciated listening for the short past while, maybe 10 episodes or so. But I appreciate the content that you bring. The 12 for 12 contest, you know, I had put it out there last week, and I had 2 people maybe subscribe that I saw. But the rest were all like, oh, I just like that tweet that you put out. And I'm like, don't like it. Do something about it. So, you know, even educators, we don't pay attention to the details sometimes as we reach out for help and expect people to help us. So I didn't win. Congratulations, Heidi Bod. And take a listen to Tom's podcast with Garnett as they talk about assessment and being relative in our classrooms. Thanks. Bye. One more thing for November 16, 2021. This morning, I'm going to start something new today. This week in my podcast, there's a educational podcast network that I belong to called the Educational Podcast Network. So if you're looking for some fantastic podcasts to listen to, we have a great collection over there at the Educational Podcast Network, supported by Chris Nessie of House of Ed Tech, who is the point person on this network. So anyhow, I've got some colleagues that I am, working with in this network because we all have our podcasts in this network. And I am going to make it my goal to include a new listen to one of the podcasts that I haven't listened to in the Educational Podcast Network over the next while. So starting off today at the very top of the list is from A Lesson Within with Gretchen Bridger. She has her podcast called the Empowered Educator Podcast. And this morning I listened to an episode called The Change Within and how we can be change agents in our schools. And I don't have the podcast number in my mind right now, but I will put it in the tweet so you can go find it. But I listened to Gretchen's podcast, and Gretchen, congratulations on a successful podcast. You're up in the hundreds of episodes, which is quite fantastic. And I learned something this morning, that I can be a change within my school. You provide us a strategy towards the end of the podcast talking about how we go about observing and gathering evidence of problems that we see in our school so that we can come up with the big problem or the most important problem to us, that when we go to our principal to say we've got a problem to solve, we have something that we can already say about that problem, as opposed to here's a problem, what are you going to do about it? Because the principals are full of busyness and problems of their own, and we need to be change agents to work alongside them. So thank you, Gretchen, for your thoughts. And people, go take a listen to A Lesson Within, Empowering Educator Podcast with Gretchen Bridger, because I like what I hear and you should like it too. Peace out, people. Talk to you soon. Bye. Hey PLN, Wednesday, December 17, 2021, out for Fresh Air at 5. After yesterday was a gravity-filled full day of appreciating nature and the impact that nature has on our civilization, and when we do things to nature, how we can't necessarily control nature. What am I talking about? Well, if you Google Abbotsford flood 2021, you will see what I'm talking about. I live in Abbotsford above the Whatcom interchange that is submerged underwater right now, that is connected to the #1 highway that travels east-west across Canada. And we are cut off at that interchange from being able to get onto the highway. Our neighboring town, Chilliwack, to the east is cut off from Abbotsford, and currently the only way that you can get from Vancouver to the rest of Canada is to go through the United States due to landslides and flooding that's going on up on the Coquihalla. So this is heavy and big, and is impacting me a little bit, because I'm thinking about the people that are, in trouble down in the flats. So take a look at that. Google Abbotsford Flood 2021 for more about that. All right, this morning as I'm walking, I listened to Monica Burns on Easy Ed Tech podcast and episode 138, as Monica brings us how to explore the world through virtual field trips. And, today we have some of our students that are going to be going online and remote due to the travel restrictions that are in place due to the flood. And so, how could these teachers take and use virtual content to take their students places? I might want to jump into Google Earth myself and go somewhere else in the world to get some relief from thinking about where I am right now. But there's great ways of doing that, and you can take the kids places to see things through their screens that would be difficult to do otherwise. All right, it's really dark right now. Okay, we'll talk to you soon, and I got more podcasts to listen to. Happy Tuesday, or Wednesday. It's Wednesday. Okay, bye. One more thing for November 17, 2021. Behind me, over my shoulder in the darkness out there, is the floodplain and what used to be called Sumas Lake. And, it's amazing. Amazing to think about. So just still in my mind, obviously. As I was walking this morning, I listened to episode, I believe, 209 of Teachers on Fire podcast with Tim Cavey, as Tim brings us a short spark episode from his blog post about students are actually thinking about learning targets and how students are processing their learning after an assessment. And one student pushed back and challenged Mr. Cavey on how that one question. Take a listen. It's good. It's really good. How are we using learning targets in our classroom to keep us ourselves and our students on track with learning? So learning is not just taking in, but it's also about demonstrating our understanding of knowledge. So yes, my learning about that flood is mind-blowing. Did you know that in 1990, the same thing happened when the Nooksack River in northwest Washington, which is just across the United States border from us, breached its banks and did the same thing? So it's amazing how where the lake used to be, Sumas Lake, it is flooding right now. So, all right, we'll talk to you soon. Got something else to listen to. Okay, bye. November 17th, 2021. One more thing, as I just am wrapping up Fresh Air at 5 this morning, I listened to episode 61 of Overthrowing Education, and Batsheva brings us guest Matt Barnes, who is a podcast host, and he is a lead learner in his children's lives and how he coaches them along their journey. And he has had his own kids in a hybrid homeschool environment, which sounds, Matt, very much like our fusion program at my school here in Abbotsford, British Columbia. And we have a 2-day-a-week program that the kids come and have an experience of technology and art and PE and social time, and the other 5 days of the week they are at home, not expected to learn those 5 days of the week, but to engage in their learning from home at a distance. And so I like how you bring this to focus with even the examples of your three children and your son. I'm sorry to say that, in here that the system kind of squashed his trajectory a little bit, because he got his eyes focused on the prize of being the valedictorian. And what do I need to do to keep that there, as opposed to learning for learning's sake and his own passion and joy. So teachers, we work in a system that helps guide students along, but I am hoping that we, in our space and the control that we have, are encouraging our students to become learners. Take a listen to Matt Barnes talk about hybrid homeschool and the global education movement, about redefining learning. And it's not about education, but it's how do we grow our students to be learners. I look back myself on my high school, and what did I get out of it? The ability to learn. My degree in science, the ability to learn. And so that is something that I have, kind of been focused on, is learning. Okay, thanks, bye. Good morning, Peel, on November 18th, 2021, out for Fresh Air at 5, and this morning the air is calm, and there's cloud over sky, and we're expecting a little bit of rain today. And typically, that's not a big deal, but these days with the flood in Abbotsford going on, and how the water level has affected so many people that live out on the Sumas Prairie and farm there, and their livelihoods are there. A little bit of rain is concerning today, because the flood waters are still high. All right, so this morning as I'm walking, I listened to episode 99 of the Staff Room podcast, and if you're a Canadian hockey fan, that from back in the day, that the number 99 was Wayne Gretzky's number. Wayne Gretzky was born in Brantford, Ontario, and he played his majority of his career out in the west coast of the continent with the Edmonton Oilers and the Los Angeles Kings. And being an Albertan, that's pretty close to where, my heart, except I was in the rival city. So I knew all about Wayne Gretzky and his exploits and the things that he did, and didn't appreciate that number until later. And so Shane Pav, number 99 represents the great one, and the great one. So your episode is the great one, number 99, following the footsteps of Wayne Gretzky, who does some amazing things. And today we have amazing hockey players as well who do amazing things. And we've got Connor McDavid of the Edmonton Oilers that has skills that are just incredible. And this isn't about hockey. This is about the Staff Room podcast, episode 99. And I am going to have to jump into one more thing to actually talk about what I want to talk about. But so while I'm finishing up this next 10 seconds, congratulations on getting to number 99. I'm looking forward to episode 100 and seeing what you guys bring to episode 100. All right, more talking in just a second. One more thing for November 18, 2021. Reflecting on the Staff Room podcast, episode 99 with Jay and Pav. They talk about decentering Remembrance Day in our classrooms. So, decentering Remembrance Day in our classrooms. When I first saw the title, Jay and Pav, I had a brief emotional response of I don't want to talk about this, because, it's a big deal. I live in a country where it's a big deal. It is important to the fact that I've got freedom today to get out here in the morning and go for my walk. The freedoms that we have in our country are so connected to Remembrance Day, and the fact that we remember, lest we forget, those that died for our freedom. Okay, so once I got past that, right at the outset, I pushed that away going, okay, don't be angry. You don't need to be grr about this. I listened and I heard you guys talking about how we talk about identity in the things that we are engaged in our culture, in our dominant culture. And what is the dominant culture? So I did grow through listening to this episode. And if you want a challenging thought. I challenge you to listen to this as well. How do we bring identity work into our classroom space to have our students be able to identify with that which is going on in our country? All right, so I'm going to talk about the identity work right now of this flood that is going on in Abbotsford, because I didn't grow up here, so I don't have that same level of connection to this land and this place that those of my colleagues that have grown up here. They have friends and family that live out in Sumas Prairie, which is the lake bed of Samathokwi Zuxtosa Lake, which is called Sumas Lake. And so that lake existed prior to settlers coming out west and going, hey, there should be great farmland right there. I'll continue my thoughts in a second. One more thing for November 19, 2021, as you know, the settlers came out from the east and worked their way across. They came across the Fraser Valley and saw this shallow lake that was present here, and which has been named Sumas Lake. And in 1920, there was a plan by some audacious settlers to drain the lake, and they proceeded to set up a pump station. They proceeded to build dikes around the area. They proceeded to divert the Chilliwack River down through the Vedder and into the Fraser River to divert that water and to basically collect the water that was in Sumas Lake and pump it out into the Fraser. All right, so that is talking about settlers. What about the people that lived here before, and the indigenous people that called that lake part of their environment and their hunting and fishing space? What happened to that? And so, there's a lot of discussion about that right now. And my identity is not connected to either side of this, except for the fact that I really appreciate the milk that I drink that comes from dairy farms on those Sumas prairies. I appreciate the eggs and chickens that are grown there, the Chilliwack corn that comes from Chilliwack, that is actually beyond, but that grows in the Fraser Valley. So that's my part of my connection. But being aware of another culture that is here that had to give up, had it taken from them, had it removed from their space, is the Sumas band of the Stolo people here, and how they lost their lake, their space, because the settlers wanted to have that for farming and fishing or farming and agriculture. Okay, so what's my identity in this? I think it's about being aware of those cultures that are in our spaces around us, and we're doing a better job today about understanding identities here in our schools in BC. All right, thanks guys. Talk to you. Bye. Hey, PLN, later on the same day, I'm out delivering papers, and I'm listening to episode 73 of Ignite EdTech Podcast with Craig Kemp. And thank you, Craig, for having on your show this week Zoe Weil, as she talks to us about the Humane Education Solution Framework, or something very close to that. So as I am listening, it's cool to hear her talk about solutionaries and how we have to grow our students to be solutionaries and problem solvers in our world. And that actually is the most important thing that we can have them leave school with. Yes, we've got content that you should learn, but if that content doesn't include problem solving and teaching them how to work through problems and watching the teacher develop and work through problems, then I think we're doing our students a disservice. And take a listen to this episode and follow Zoe Weil, and she has been doing this for a while and wants to grow the world into being solutionaries. All right, talk to you soon. Thanks. I got more to listen to. Okay, bye. One last thing for November 18, 2021. My goodness, is it damp out here. So the flood waters look like they're receding out in the valley. I'm just coming down, can see the flood zone. Looks like the water's going down a little bit, so that's good. But it is raining today, so that's of concern that the water might be going back up. The flood's been captivating my attention, and it's been heavy on my heart because there's so many people's livelihoods that have been affected by this large volume of rain that has fallen on the Pacific Northwest and southwestern British Columbia. over the past week or so. So much so that people have had to be evacuated from the Sumas Prairie, where the Sumas Lake used to be, and how the water has come up over the Nooksack River. Way in the back there, you can see out in the prairies and the water. So yes, climate change. Is this a product of climate change? I don't know. This happened 30 years ago. So, Tim, what do you think? Is it this climate change, or is this just normal? Because I don't know the answer to that. But you talked on episode 43 of Science 360 podcast, Tim Stevenson, and had students from James Kennedy Elementary School, which is nearby your school there in Langley, and had them over to the high school and spent a day with them in the library researching, and then you let them sit down in front of the podcast mic and you shared their content on episode 43 of Science 360. So you can let their teacher know that somebody beyond their classroom has listened to the podcast, and they've got some good ideas about how we can reduce climate change and, start using electric vehicles, and the work that we can do about reducing garbage in the oceans and protecting coral reefs, and how we can take care of our environment better. So that's awesome. Share that along, Tim. Appreciate it. Thank you all. Take a listen to what these kids are doing. And can you do that same kind of thing in your school? I bet I could do that in my school. Just have to get around to doing it. All right. Have a great day. Bye-bye. Hey PLN, it's Friday, November 19th, 2021, and we are at the end of a really long and crazy week here for myself, as in BC we've been hit with some major rainstorms, and on Monday night, the water started rising in the Fraser Valley just below us here, and we have had a flood state, a state of emergency. There are highways in British Columbia that have been broken because of the volume of rain and the washout, and so the Coquihalla is broken, and we can't get to Merritt that way. There's been landslides, people trapped in towns because of landslides, and they can't travel home. So there's been a lot of new trauma that's going on, because, it's affecting people's lives, where we live. Like, how do we get around bare cupboards again, like at the beginning of COVID with panic shopping, all those kinds of things. People displaced from their homes, farmers not wanting to leave their farms because they've got to protect their stuff, but they can't because the water is relentless. So there's lots going on. I'm glad to be here at Friday. Honestly, it's true. And this morning I listened to Jake Miller, and I got to go get some information. I'll be right back. Jake had Dr. Will Damport on episode 68 of Educational Duct Tape podcast as a guest, and they talked about Schoology as a learning management system and how it is so full-featured to provide opportunities for students to create in multiple ways, express their learning in different ways, formative and summative assessment opportunities. All those kinds of things are fantastic. And I haven't seen Schoology. I am in a Moodle school with our online learning, and in my face-to-face space, I use Google Classroom. Now, I'm not going to say that I don't want to see Schoology. I would like to see it. Pretty fantastic, so I might go poke my nose in there, but without having the need, it's hard to invest the time. I'll be right back. One more thing for November 19th, 2021, continuing my thoughts about learning management systems based on the episode of Educational Duct Tape podcast with Jake Miller that he had with Dr. Will Damport on episode 68. I use Moodle in our space. That's the learning management system that we have. I like it. Am I married to it? No. But what we do need to realize is what you have, you need to be able to use and use it well. Jake, you talked about functional over fancy. There are places where you just got to get the job done and get it functionally done before you make it fancy. Schoology sounds fancy, and that's good. That's really good if they can do that in a functional way. If you're sacrificing function, though, for fancy, then I think that it's not a great thing. The first time I saw Google Classroom, I laughed because I'm like, who is ever going to use that? It was basically functional, like just functional at the time. It wasn't pretty at all, and I laughed. But now today, I am a big proponent of using Google Classroom. That was 5 years ago that I laughed, maybe 6 years ago. And now today, this is one of the primary ways that we have in our schools district right now. And as we have flood, remote learning situations going on where schools are closed due to the flooding and kids can't get to school, and when they're safe and able, they can join Google Classroom. That's a way that teachers can engage their students from afar in a very functional, simplistic manner that doesn't require a lot of preloading and student understanding to be able to get there. Parents can get there and figure it out, which is pretty cool. All right, so the point is, whatever you're using, become familiar and comfortable with it so that you can utilize the tools that are there. If those tools aren't there, figure out how you can bring tools in to allow students to draw and create and make videos and record audio. Another one that we're using in our district with our little ones is Seesaw. So I'm excited about that opportunity to see technology being used by our littles. All right, Jake, thanks. And Dr. Will, thank you so much. Have a great day, guys. Peace out. Bye. As my one word for 2021 is appreciate, I appreciate you giving me a listen as I've created this podcast experience for you. It's a unique Blinkist or Coles Notes version of the content I take in, like a highlight reel, so that you can hopefully find other interesting podcasts you may not have considered before. I've recorded the specific podcast episodes in the show notes for your learning convenience. Please subscribe so you don't miss any of my upcoming episodes. And if you enjoy this podcast and its format, share it with someone else. Tweet about your experience or give it a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Fresh Air at 5 can also be found on Voice Ed Radio. Your voice is right here, and on the Education Podcast Network, podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. I hope you have a fantastic day and get some fresh air before the day is out, and take care of yourself because you're worth it.